Okay, so now we've set up the page. So what we need to do now is we need to think about where we're going to get the data from. We need to put the data, make sure the data's stored onto the page. Okay, so we talked about using not session storage, but we want to store the data, okay, the score into BTN check, and we also want to be able to put the data into BTN check as well. Okay, so let's do this one first. So at the beginning, when we load up the game or when we load up the flashcards, the score should be set to 0. Okay, so when we start, we want to set the score to 0. All right, and we're going to put it into BTN check. We've already got BTN check, which is this button. So in effect, we're going to hide the data away inside this object. Okay, so when we load up this page, if you look on flashcards HTML, our script that we're using, okay, when we load it up is called flashcards.js. So if we go to flashcards.js, so it should be in pages, JS pages, and then flashcards. So this is where we've set things up. So when we started the page, right, this is what we did. We set up some session storage and we did some buttons. So here we also want to set the score for the learning tool. Okay, so that's what we want to do. We want to set the score. So we want to set the score into BTN check. So the way we do that, if we store data in an element, this is what we do, right? So we store data in the element like that. That's our code. So it's a key value pair. So I've just copied that and pasted it here. Okay, so here, storing data in an element. So storing, we want to store the score in BTN check. Okay, so we use a jQuery $, that's jQuery, that is jQuery selector, and then hash BTN check. So that must use the ID for something called BTN check, which is this button here. And we're going to set a data attribute, and the data we're going to set is a score, that's the key, and the value is 0. So that will set the score to 0 when we load up the form. Okay, so when we load up the form, we don't see anything. It's actually stuck inside here. Okay, so at the moment the score is 0. Okay, so it's important to remember that. So the next thing we want to do is to make sure that when we click next term, it takes the data that we're using to build the card and also puts the card data into there. So that happens, as it says, that happens in get next card. So if we find get next card, that should be in buttons. So it should be in here somewhere. There it is, function get next card. So this is where we are using the data. So I've already started doing this, so we're going to change this, right? So what we do is do the same again. We want BTN check. Okay, we're going to add it to the check button. Okay, so the reason we're adding it to check button, because we're going to click on the check button, on the check your answer button, and we want the data immediately available to us. Okay, so we're not going searching anywhere, it's actually there in the button. So what this does, so remember get next card, so it gets the next term by generating a random number, that's a random number, and then we get that out available. So we say here, so we're making the card, look here, with data.available, and then this is the random number that we've picked. So he goes to the available list, gets the data, okay, using the index, and he gets that data and uses that to make a card. Okay, so we want to do that. We want to store that data. So this is the data that's being used to make the card. So data.available, and then square brackets data.current. So that's what it's going to do. It's going to take that data, stick it as a data item on the button, and that data item is called current term. Okay, so that now is putting the data onto the button. I'm going to save that. So we don't see anything. Okay, so in here now, attached to the button, in its pocket, if you like, we've put two things. We put the score, and we've also put current term. So this button, when I click on it, it knows it holds that data in its pocket, the score, and it holds the current term. Okay, so that's the second thing we've done now. So we've set up the forms or the form elements, and now we've attached the data to the button. And now the next thing to do is to then make some code to do what we needed to do.